In this episode, we answer, what's the best exercise for a young skier to do?
Why does activity relate to focus in the classroom?
What's the most important thing for a young adult to do in terms of fitness and strength?
And what exercise should you always make sure you can do whether you're a young person or an adult?
You ask questions and we'll answer them. This is the Ask DVCC Academy Edition show.
Hey, this is Mark and Steve from the DVCC, and this is the Ask DVCC show, Academy Edition. So, we've got some more questions posed to us from clients and also from non-clients, so feel free, if you're not a client of the DVCC, to throw us your questions on any of the social medias. Today's first question is...
What's the most important thing for a teenager to do when it comes to fitness and health? So this is quite a common question. We get a lot of different parents and sometimes the actual teenagers wanting to know what to do when it comes to fitness. Now, there's been some interesting changes over the last, I think, 10 to 15 years about the amount of actual activity that teenagers do. So, for example, children aged over from 5 to 16 spend an average, I'm just reading this because it's very important, of 6.5 hours a day in front of a screen compared to around 3 hours 10 years ago. So that's an awful lot of time now spent just sat in front of a screen. Obviously that includes school, but a lot of that time is at home, potentially in front of computer screens and things as well.
To be fair, we're 33 now, but I remember having a Commodore 64 and occasionally being able to play on that because obviously computers weren't anywhere near as capable as they are now and probably as enjoyable. So there's a lot more for children to play with that doesn't include moving around and being active.
Yeah. So on that, obviously that has massive impacts on a teenager, a young person's physical development. So for example, when you're in the front of a screen, you tend to be hunched over, you tend to be either looking down, if you're on an iPad I guess, or if you're looking at a desktop, you're still hunched over. And so what used to happen is, we see a lot that as you get older, you hit your 30s, your 40s, your flexibility tends to diminish. Now, that's not necessarily an age thing, it's basically a cumulative sitting in a poor position thing. So after a while you're sat there, just gradually your body starts to change and become less mobile, less flexible, and you'll end up with that jutted forward head because that's how you're sitting. You'll get really tight in your hips because you're sat with your hips flexed the whole time, and that has massive impacts on your lower backs and things like that. But the problem is now with teenagers and young people starting to develop that a lot earlier than they would have done in the past. So they're really developing these kind of things that you'd see in the 20, 30, 40-year-old people now starting from 10 onwards, or actually sometimes even younger, so that by the time you're 25, you end up how someone used to be when they were 35 or 45.
Okay, so let me stop you there. Now, strategies. So, strategies for this. Obviously, it's tough. You want to start with children being young. Don't let them play in front of the computer, but marry that out. So I know some schools, some forward-thinking schools, have stand-up desks as good examples. You can have that at home for your child. If they're going to play on the computer, which is fine, obviously, but they could be standing up, it just puts you into a better position.
I think the key is being aware of it. So, for example, knowing exactly how much time is spent sat down basically, not moving. That's key. So if you're tracking that, you can then try and develop ways that you can basically increase that movement. So for example, no one sat down for more than 30 minutes before they stand up, walk around, or have to go for a walk. Whatever it is, by actually tracking how much time is spent inactive, it's a very good way of being able to develop more activity.
So it's not for us to say how active your child should be, but what we're suggesting is that if they are inactive playing computer games, that you try and marry it up with the amount of active things that they do, active pursuits that they do, to limit their kyphosis, that type of seating position.
I always think of it, if someone's going to have a chocolate bar, then rather than say don't have a chocolate bar, say, well, have some vegetables. Have some vegetables, so it's a one-to-one relationship between having a chocolate bar, having vegetables. Same thing with a certain amount of time spent sat down on a computer, certain amount of time spent being active. And so that's what the answer is to the ideal form of activity, is actually just being active. It doesn't matter, whatever gets you out and about and moving.
Okay. Next question.
If there is one exercise that a child should do, what is it?
I will throw this to my younger sibling.
Well, we'd probably say squats, because they're an exercise that, interestingly enough, the younger we are, the better we are at them. So if you've ever seen a young child squat down or sit down, they'll easily sit down on their heels without trouble. But try and do that when you're a little bit older, and you'll fall over. It'll be all over the place. And it's probably gone around the internet where everyone's seen how people sit in Africa, or people that tend to be in less developed countries tend to be able to just sit down, squat down perfectly, because that's how we should be able to be. But it's over time, like we already touched on the previous question, sitting down a lot, we tend to lose flexibility, which ends up in an inability to actually do simple things that we are designed to do, such as squatting.
So then, obviously this is directed for Academy 11 to 17 year olds. So then basically, don't stop doing what you can do when you're young.
And don't let
squatting.
Don't lose that ability. So and quite often, being 15, you'll find it hard already to be able to squat down to that position. But what you'll find is that you're able to develop it back or get it back much easier than you would do when you're 25 or 35. So we would say be able to sit down into a squat position, which is basically sitting on your heels, being able to get your bum all the way down to the floor. And to start with, you may not be able to do that, but develop that back, get it back.
So 11 to 17, you want to be able to squat down like you used to be able to, probably at 8 or 0 to 8 or 9 or 10, and just be able to maintain that and keep that position.
And just by doing it, sometimes sitting down there, you'll actually develop and keep that skill.
Good answer. Moving on to the next one.
Why did the study that was done in Canada connect young people that did an hour of exercise as doing better in school?
Interesting question. And obviously, the DVCC is health and fitness based, but this is a study that was done in Canada, and it did relate children and teenagers, young people, how they did in school related to the amount of activity. So they added an hour of activity, and those young people did better at school. And interesting, they didn't give a definitive reason for it. They're obviously going to be further studies and things. However, I think there were some potential hypotheses about why that happened. Obviously, being active does increase certain hormones, which can be linked with more focus and more drive. But another thing that being active in sport and doing different things like that can give you is focus and discipline.
And so handle stress.
And the ability to handle stress and things. So, for example, it's the same, obviously, teenagers, young people feel stressed the same as adults do when it's exam times and things. And so often, just the typical thing is to try and study more, to try and do more, when actually taking yourself into a de-stressing environment can actually help focus for when you actually need to study.
So, effectively, if you exercise now or you have exercise, you'll notice as an adult that everything seems awful. You go to the gym or you go and exercise and you feel better afterwards. Obviously, you release endorphins. Same thing for 11 to 17 year olds is activity will help them handle the rest of their life, basically.
But yeah, it gives you the structure, the right hormones, like you said, to focus and drive and to really stay disciplined.
Good. Okay, last but not least.
I'm a young skier. What type of exercises should I be focusing on?
It's an interesting one, this, because we've dealt with it a lot with adults, and obviously now since the DVCC Academy, more and more with children, because it's seemingly that more people are skiing. So, I'll throw this to you again.
Well, it's interesting. Basically, you need to be focusing on muscles that will help protect, most often injured, it's obviously lower body is your knees, and the muscle to really focus on are your hamstrings. So you'd think it'd be your front of your legs, your quads, but they're kind of taken care of when you ski. What happens is you end up with really strong front of your legs and weaker, relatively, back of your legs, so hamstrings. So what you want to focus on is when you're not skiing, and they've done a lot of these studies with the Olympic skiers and things, is to try and get the ratio of your hamstring strength to your quad strength, the front of your leg strength, as high as possible. So rather than your top of your legs being twice as strong as your back of your legs, you want to try and get your hamstrings to about 80% ideally.
So let me interrupt. So notice the question was from a young skier, so that's somebody that's skiing now. It would be slightly different if someone was going to be starting skiing. their quads, the front of their legs, might not be necessarily that much stronger because they're not skiing and they're not putting their body under that pressure frequently. Therefore, they will need to focus on their VMO, the vastus medialis oblique, the muscle there, the muscle there, to improve it. But as the question is from a young skier, they're naturally going to be putting their body under, or their quads under more stress than their hamstrings, and so they need to focus on strengthening the back of their body.
Yeah, and you also want to take care of your vastus medialis oblique as well. But like we said, it's the ratio of your hamstrings to your quads which can really protect your knee as well. But most people don't do.
So same deal with a lot of teenagers now. You'll see if they do any weights or resistance work, a lot of them are looking big in the upper body and chest, not on their back because they're basically training what they can see. Same with your bum and your hamstrings. You want to be training the muscles you can't see as much, if not more frequently, for skiing specifically, to increase your ability to ski and ski better and safer. Okay, so that was the Ask DVCC Academy Edition show. As with all these shows, we ask a question of the day. And the question of the day I will pass to Stephen.
When are you next skiing?
Oh, nice. When are you next skiing? I am going next year. And so let us know in the comments below when you're next skiing. And as always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section also. Bye-bye.